My husband abandoned me for a younger woman. Unaware, I was the only one on his will. Jennifer stood at the balcony of her penthouse apartment, staring out over the skyline. The city below was alive with light and motion, but her heart felt still, too still. It had been 12 years since she married Tony. They were the couple everyone admired. Elegant, successful, and inseparable. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. She had met Tony when he was just a struggling real estate agent, barely making enough to pay his rent. Jennifer, already a rising businesswoman in the fashion retail world, saw potential in him, not just in his work ethic, but in his heart. She believed in him. She loaned him the capital to open his first office, helped design his logo, and even used her network to land him his first few clients. Together, they built an empire. Or so she thought. But lately, things had changed. Tony had become distant. He came home late, always blaming work stress. He had stopped asking about her day, stopped noticing her new hairstyles, and started sleeping in the guest room after claiming her snoring kept him up. Jennifer tried to make excuses. Maybe it's the pressure. Maybe he's just tired, she told herself as she sat alone at their dinner table, the food cold and untouched, yet deep down, she could feel the gap between them widening. Every hug felt forced, every kiss mechanical, every silence screamed louder than words. One evening, as she folded laundry in the bedroom, Tony's phone vibrated on the nightstand. She never touched his phone. The trust was the cornerstone of their relationship, but something made her pick it up this time. The screen lit up with a message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that red dress for me." Jennifer's hands shook, her knees buckled, and she sat down hard on the edge of the bed. Her mind raced, but her heart ached more. Her worst fears were no longer shadows. They had stepped into the light. Later that night, she sat quietly on the sofa, pretending to read a book as Tony walked in, grabbed his car keys, and muttered, "Work. Emergency, don't wait up." She smiled faintly and said, "Be safe." But the moment the door clicked shut, her smile vanished. Jennifer didn't know where he was going, but she intended to find out. And just like that, the woman who had built her husband's dreams was about to discover how badly he had broken hers. Jennifer followed Tony's car that night, her fingers clenched tightly around the steering wheel. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Not from fear, but from the sting of betrayal that wrapped around her chest like a cold iron chain. He had always been predictable when he said work emergency. It usually meant drinks at the rooftop bar of the Mirage Hotel. But tonight, he bypassed the city and took a sharp turn into a quiet residential area. On the outskirts, Jennifer parked a few houses away and killed her headlights. From the shadows, she watched Tony walk up to a sleek modern duplex and knock on the door, like he'd done it 100 times before. Seconds later, the door opened, and there she was. Abigail. She couldn't have been more than 25. Tall, flawless skin, body. Like it belonged on a magazine cover. She was wrapped in a silky red robe, probably the same one mentioned in the text. Abigail smiled widely and flung her arms around Tony's neck. He kissed her passionately without hesitation. Jennifer felt her breath hitch. Her nails dug into the steering wheel as tears welled up in her eyes. The man who once knelt on one knee, promising her forever, was now giving his forever to someone else. She sat there, frozen, watching them disappear into the house. Her heart crumbled silently in her chest, but she refused to let it show. Not yet. The next few weeks were a masterclass in self-control. Jennifer didn't confront him, not directly. She watched quietly as Tony grew more distant, now sleeping out more often than he slept in. His lies were sloppy, his excuses thinner than tissue paper, and through it all, Jennifer smiled. She began documenting everything: his whereabouts, the expenses on his company card, late-night call, logs. She even hired a private investigator, not out of revenge, but clarity. She wanted the truth, and the truth came back cruel and complete. Tony had been seeing Abigail for nearly a year. He had taken her on expensive trips to Dubai, gifted her a car registered under his company's name, and recently rented her an apartment. He had become reckless with money, with decisions, with her. Then came the final blow. One morning, as Jennifer prepared his breakfast like usual, Tony walked in, and freshly showered, crisp in a suit, and colder than ever. "I think we should get a divorce," he said flatly. "This isn't working anymore." Jennifer calmly placed the teacup on the table, looked at him and said, "Is that what you think or what she wants?" Tony flinched but said nothing. That silence told her everything. She gave a slow, graceful nod. "All right then, let's do it your way." But deep inside, a storm was brewing. She wasn't going to fight for him. She was going to fight for herself. And when the smoke cleared, she knew he'd wish he never let her go. The news spread like wildfire. "Tony and Jennifer are getting divorced." She must have done something. Look how young and stunning the new girl is. I always knew she was too boring for a man like Tony. The whispers stung. Jennifer heard them at business brunches, in boutiques, even in church. Friends who once praised her elegance now looked at her with judgment. Some pitied her, others gloated behind their smiles. But the worst pain came from the betrayal of silence from people she had loved, helped, and uplifted, now watching her fall without reaching out. Tony, meanwhile, basked in his newfound freedom. He moved in with Abigail, and began flaunting their relationship like a shiny new toy. Lavish Instagram posts, club appearances, beachside photos. It was like a movie reel of everything Jennifer never received in 12 years of marriage. And then came the charity gala. Jennifer was one of the board members of the annual Women of Strength fundraiser. She had put years into building that event, making it one of the most elegant and respected social functions in the city. But this time, Tony and Abigail walked in like they owned the place. Jennifer wore a floor-length navy blue gown, understated yet regal. She stood near the wine table, gracefully accepting greetings from acquaintances, keeping her composure intact. Then she heard the click of high heels. "Jennifer?" Abigail's voice dripped with mock sweetness. "I didn't think you'd have the courage to show up tonight." Jennifer turned, slowly, facing the woman who had stolen her husband, but not her dignity. "Why wouldn't I?" she replied calmly. "I helped build this evening." Abigail stepped closer and whispered cruelly, "And now you'll watch it from the sidelines, just like everything else. You should be thanking me. You were wasting your best years on a man who didn't love you." With that, she casually knocked over a glass of red wine, letting it splash across Jennifer's satin gown. Gasps filled the room. Jennifer froze. Everyone watched. But instead of breaking down or retaliating, she smiled. A calm, chilling smile. She picked up a napkin, dabbed the stain gently, and said, "You're right about one thing, Abigail. I did waste years, but not anymore." And she walked away, her head high, leaving Abigail blinking in confusion. That night, Jennifer didn't cry. She stood before her mirror, wiped the wine stain, and whispered to herself, "No more tears for people who don't deserve them." Tony had taken her pride, her marriage, and her peace, but he'd unknowingly left her with something far more powerful: control. And it was time she used it. Jennifer sat in the quiet wood-paneled office of Mr. Ransom, her longtime attorney and family friend. The scent of old paper and lemon polish filled the room as she sipped herbal tea, her mind racing. "Are you sure he never updated it?" she asked again. Mr. Ransom, a gray-haired man with wise eyes and a calm demeanor, nodded slowly as he flipped through the pages of a thick legal folder. "Positive this will was signed 7 years ago, when Tony had that health scare. He insisted on making you the sole beneficiary of everything: real estate, holdings, company shares, personal assets. It hasn't been altered since." Jennifer blinked. "Not even after the separation?" "No. And legally, he would need your signature to change anything significant regarding your jointly owned properties and the trust account." A silence stretched between them, as the realization settled over her like a silk blanket woven with fire. Tony had walked away, assuming he'd win, assuming that she was the one left behind. But he was wrong. He may have abandoned the marriage, but legally, Jennifer still held the keys to his kingdom. Mr. Ransom leaned forward. "You could strip him of everything right now, Jennifer. He's reckless, he's distracted, and you have full legal rights, but I know you. You're not out for revenge." Jennifer's gaze hardened. "No, I'm not. But I won't stay quiet while he parades his betrayal around town. He left me with nothing emotionally, but left everything else in my name. She stood, her posture straight and powerful. Let him believe he won. Let him think I'm weak. I want him to dance in his illusion of control while I quietly pull the strings. That week, she made her first move. She transferred her shares in the real estate company to a newly formed holding company under her name. She began attending board meetings again. Under the radar, she paused. All expansion plans Tony had been planning. Initiated financial audits. The company's CFO, Mark, called Tony frantically one morning. "Boss, something's wrong. Jennifer's name is showing up on every financial document. Her signature, her authorizations." Tony laughed. "That's impossible. She's not part of this company anymore." But deep down, a chill slid down his spine. Meanwhile, Jennifer worked silently from her home office. She was calm, strategic, and unlike Tony, she was thinking 3 moves ahead. He thought he replaced her. He had no idea. She was still the foundation. And soon, he'd realized she was the storm that would bring it all down. Abigail stood barefoot, in the middle of a candlelit rooftop, her hands over her mouth in exaggerated shock. Rose petals were scattered in a heart shape on the ground. Fairy lights twinkled around them, and a string quartet played soft, romantic music in the background. Tony was down on one knee, holding out a sparkling diamond ring. A photographer snapped shots as Abigail squealed. "Noted, yes, of course, I'll marry you." The video was uploaded within the hour. Social media exploded with congratulations, fire, emojis, and hashtags like power couple and young lovewins. Jennifer watched it from her laptop alone in her elegant kitchen, sipping coffee. No tears, just silence. She clicked the volume off, then calmly opened her email and scheduled another meeting with her company's board of directors. While Abigail flaunted her ring, Jennifer was finalizing a decision that would block Tony's access to certain business funds, unless signed off by a board, majority of which he controlled. Days later, at a high-end furniture store, Abigail flipped through catalogs for their new home makeover. Tony's corporate card was swiped 5 times that afternoon, the total racking up to over 100,000 in less than 3 hours. "You're spoiling me," Abigail giggled as she kissed his cheek. Tony laughed, but a bead of sweat slid down his temple. The bank alert had pinged earlier. One of his company accounts was frozen, pending authorization. He hadn't had time to check. Maybe a glitch. But that night as they sat at dinner, his phone rang. It was Mark, his CFO. "Tony, we have a serious issue. Our main investor pulled out this afternoon. He said he won't finalize any deal unless he hears directly from Jennifer. Hey, he doesn't want to proceed without her input." Tony stiffened. Abigail frowned. "Is something wrong, babe?" Tony gave a forced smile. "No, just work stuff. Everything's under control." But it wasn't. That night, Tony tried calling Jennifer. For the first time in weeks, she didn't pick up. He left a message. "Hey, we need to talk. Can we meet?" Jennifer played the message twice, then deleted it. She was done playing house now. She was playing chess. Tony had proposed to his new queen. But he forgot Jennifer was still the one holding the crown. 3 weeks after the rooftop proposal, Tony's world began to shift. Slowly at first, then all at once. At home, Abigail was no longer the sweet, charming woman he had fallen for. She became demanding, restless and unapologetically extravagant every day, brought a new designer outfit, a high-end spa treatment, or a brunch with her equally lavish friends. She began planning a wedding, with no budget in mind, imported orchids, a castle venue in France, 10 bridesmaids in matching Italian couture. Tony tried to keep up, but cracks started forming behind the scenes. First, his financial advisor called Tony. "You're overextending the business, isn't generating the same profits. Expansion has stalled, and some of your authorizations are being overruled." "Overruled by who?" Tony snapped. The answer chilled him. Jennifer's new holding company. He hung up and slammed his fist on the desk. Jennifer, he had underestimated her again. That afternoon, He rushed into the office to confront Mark. "I thought she was out of the picture," Tony barked. Mark rubbed his forehead. "She owns 60% of the controlling shares legally. She's never left. You just didn't pay attention." Tony cursed under his breath. He had been so consumed with Abigail, with appearances, that he failed to see Jennifer moving in the shadows like a quiet storm. And the consequences were coming fast. One by one, investors began pulling out. Projects were delayed. Permits were stalled. His reputation took hits he couldn't stop. Meanwhile at home, Abigail noticed the change. "Why are you always stressed now?" she asked one evening, sipping champagne on the designer couch. "Business," Tony muttered. "Well, fix it. You can't let our wedding be affected. I want my custom Vera gown ready by summer." Tony stared at her, realizing for the first time that this woman, for all her beauty and charm, didn't love him. She loved his lifestyle, a lifestyle that Jennifer still controlled. Later that night, he sat alone in the living room, phone in hand, staring at Jennifer's number. He didn't call. Not yet. Meanwhile, Jennifer met with her board in a sleek downtown building, dressed in a sharp cream pantsuit and red lipstick. Calm, powerful, untouchable. She smiled as the final motion passed. Tony's access to all financial decisions would now require her written consent. From a distance, she watched his empire crack, and she hadn't even raised her voice. The ballroom was golden with chandeliers, elegance dripping from every corner. The city's elite had gathered for the prestigious Founder Circle Gala, an event both Tony and Jennifer had helped fund for years. Jennifer stepped out of her black car with poise, dressed in a custom white satin gown that clung to her curves with grace. Her long black hair was styled in soft waves, and diamond earrings shimmered against her smooth brown skin. Heads turned, whispers followed. She had been silent for too long, and tonight she intended to speak without uttering a word. Inside, Tony walked in with Abigail on his arm. Abigail wore a fiery red dress, her fingers glittering with jewelry Tony could barely afford anymore. Her smile was wide, almost exaggerated. She was determined to show off. This was her turf now. Until Jennifer arrived. Tony's jaw tightened when he saw her. Abigail smirked and whispered. She had the nerve to show up here too. Jennifer, unfazed, made her way through the room, greeted by old friends, investors, and clients, many of whom were already aware of the quiet shifts in control behind the scenes. Whispers floated. Didn't she just take back full voting rights? She's the real power behind that company, isn't she? Abigail approached first, wineglass in hand and poison in her smile. "Well, if it isn't the ex-wife," she said loudly, still pretending to belong here. Jennifer turned slowly, pretending, "Darling, I funded this event." Abigail scoffed. "You're old news, Jennifer. You couldn't keep your man and now you're just a bitter memory." Jennifer's smile was effortless. "Oh, I didn't lose him. I gave him away." Tony stepped in, clearly agitated. "Jennifer, not here." She raised a hand, silencing him. Then, without warning, she pulled out a small, white envelope and handed it to the event host standing nearby. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said into the mic, "we have an unexpected but powerful update." The room went silent. "I've just received word that the Jennifer L. Holdings has officially assumed full ownership of the Tony Lexington Realty Group effective immediately." Gasps, cameras flashed. Tony turned pale. Abigail stammered, "What does that mean?" Jennifer's voice was soft but deadly. "It means I own the company, the buildings, the accounts, even the house you live in. You've both been living off my empire while mocking me." She leaned in, inches from Abigail. "Enjoy your stay while it lasts." The crowd erupted with murmurs. Tony looked like he'd been punched. Abigail's face fell. Jennifer turned and walked out slowly, calm and victorious. She didn't need revenge. The truth was louder than any insult. Tony's world collapsed faster than he could grasp it. In the days following the gala, investors withdrew one after another, citing concerns about stability. Long-time partners stopped returning his calls. Emails were left unread. Meeting requests cancelled. He walked into his office one morning, only to find security guards changing the locks. "Sir," one of them said awkwardly, "we've been instructed to escort you out." The new board directive came from Jennifer L. Holdings. Tony stood frozen. His name was still on the glass door, but he no longer belonged there. The drive home was even worse. He sat in silence as his car navigated through traffic, phone buzzing non-stop. Media outlets were running headlines. Ex-wife reclaims empire after CEO's affair scandal. Real estate tycoon loses company to former spouse. By the time he reached the gate of his mansion, he was greeted by another surprise. A letter taped to the front door. Eviction notice IT. Property reclamation defective immediately. Abigail was already inside, packing her things in rage. "I thought you said this place was yours," she shouted, hurling her designer heels into a suitcase. "You said she was out of your life." Tony rubbed his temples. "She blindsided me." "No," Abigail hissed. "You underestimated her." She grabbed her bags and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Tony stood alone in the foyer, surrounded by silence and debt. His phone vibrated. It was the bank again. He let it ring. He sank onto the cold marble floor, head in his hands. Once, he was the man everyone admired. Sharp suit, powerful wife, booming business. Now, he had no business, no woman, no home. Just consequences. Meanwhile, Jennifer watched it all unfold, from the comfort of her new executive office. Glass-walled sunlit, and elevated above the skyline. She didn't rejoice, but she felt peace. Tony had taken her heart, and broken it without remorse. Now life had returned the favor with interest. She sent one final message to Tony, through her lawyer. "I've taken nothing that wasn't already mine. I wish you healing, but I will not be your crutch." She signed it calmly, clicked off her tablet, and turned her focus to what mattered more. Rebuilding herself. Because power wasn't just in owning buildings or bank accounts. Power was in surviving betrayal and rising above it. And Jennifer had become the very definition of that power. Jennifer stood before a crowd of ambitious young women, her voice poised, powerful, and full of conviction. "I once thought love meant sacrificing your voice," she said into the microphone, her eyes scanning the room. "But I learned that silence can be just as loud and just as dangerous." Applause filled the grand conference hall. The Women in Power Summit had chosen Jennifer as their keynote speaker, and she didn't disappoint. Since taking back control of Tony's company, she had rebranded it under her name JL Legacy Group. Gone were the old logos, the stale board members, and the toxic culture in their place. She built something fresh, ethical, and empowering. She promoted talented women into leadership roles, created housing development projects for single mothers, and launched a scholarship fund for female entrepreneurs called the Abigail Grant, not named after her former rival, but after a forgotten grandmother who once raised her alone with strength and dignity. It wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. Jennifer now graced magazine covers. Forbes Africa called her the Phoenix CEO. Her calm but fierce leadership style inspired thousands. Television shows requested interviews. Universities begged her to mentor her. Story had become more than just gossip. It was a movement. Still, even amidst the spotlight, she stayed humble. Every Sunday, she volunteered at a local shelter under a false name. Every evening, she shared tea with her elderly neighbor, Miss Harriet, who didn't care about business but always complimented her choice of lipstick. But perhaps the most healing moment came when she walked past her old home, Tony's former mansion now listed for sale. Weeds had overtaken the garden. The lights were off, the gate was locked. Jennifer didn't stop. She simply smiled and kept walking. A week later, she received a letter. It was from Tony. "Jennifer, I know I don't deserve a response. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you never deserved what I did. I see that now. Everything I built was because of you, and everything I lost was because I forgot that. I hope you're proud of who you've become. I am." Jennifer folded the letter, placed it in her drawer, and closed it. She didn't need closure. She had already created her own. The sun shone warmly through the glass-paneled windows of the community center, where Jennifer stood, surrounded by beaming women, children, and supporters. Banners that read "From Pain to Power" hung on the walls. Cameras flashed. The atmosphere was light, victorious, and alive. Today, Jennifer was launching her latest initiative, a mentorship hub for divorced and widowed women called The Second Chapter. It wasn't just a program. It was her story transformed into purpose. As she cut the ribbon, applause thundered. Later, after the crowd cleared and speeches ended, Jennifer stepped outside to catch her breath. The wind rustled gently through the trees. That's when she saw him. Tony. He looked smaller somehow, older. No longer dressed in tailored suits, just simple slacks and a shirt that had clearly been worn too many times. He stood silently beside his aging car, clutching a letter. Jennifer hesitated only a moment before walking toward him. "Jennifer," he said quietly, eyes misting, "I didn't come to beg or make a scene. I just wanted to thank you for everything." She nodded. "You already did in your letter." Hay chuckled bitterly. "Even that felt like too little too late. I destroyed the one person who built me." "No," Jennifer replied softly. "You destroyed yourself. I just chose not to follow you down." He looked down. He looked happy. "I am," she said, "not because of the money or the power, but because I learned to love the person I became without you." Tony nodded slowly, visibly holding back tears. "I hope someday I find that peace." "I hope so too," Jennifer said. "But that journey, you'll have to walk it alone." They stood there for a few more seconds. Two people who once shared a life, now strangers with a painful history, and no future home. Then Jennifer turned and walked away. Not out of anger, but because she finally could. That night, she stood before a mirror in her quiet apartment. Not the one she once shared with Tony, but a new space she chose for herself. Simple, warm, full of books, plants, and art. She smiled. She had been broken. She had been betrayed. But she had not been beaten. She was the storm that rebuilt the ruins, the woman who rose from ashes, and the soul that chose healing over hate. Her story wasn't about a man who left. It was about a woman who returned to herself. And in that return, she found everything.